Shifting manufacturing bases will become critical in the global economic overhaul caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. In times of uncertainty, businesses now prefer to secure sourcing from multiple non-traditional geographies. In such a scenario, which markets and industries stand to benefit? What will new age supply chains look like? In this session, business leaders will crack these key questions. Vikramjit Ray to moderate the conversation, the editor of ET Hospitality World.
Welcome to this very special panel discussion on the global supply chain in post-COVID-19 world. I have two very interesting and eminent panelists. I have Rono Dutta, who is the CEO of Indigo, India's leading airline, and I have Sanjay Srivastava, who is the business head for Mahindra World City and director Origin. They're going to be talking about two very different aspects of supply chain and how supply chain, especially the global supply chain, is of crucial importance for any business, especially one which wants to spread its wings across the planet. So I'm going to start by speaking to Rono. Rono Dutta, let's first say that, there has been immense disruption, especially in the hospitality space, which I report on, and of course in the travel space where you belong to. So we can't really deny that. But along with the disruption of having no supply, as in having no supply of customers, what is the impact on the supply chain aspect of the business?
So, as you know, airlines are such a critical part of any country's economy. We talk a lot about infrastructure and how important roads are, how important ports are. But in the new world, if you will, it's all about airline connectivity. So cities that have large airline complexes, and I think of Frankfurt as an example. Frankfurt was a nothing, and it built a huge airline complex, and look where Frankfurt is today. So airline really is the sort of platform for future growth. And it's frustrating that we are having so much government restrictions and capacity caps on our growth. We would love to grow more. Right now, we're only doing 30% of the capacity. And, if people can't travel, businesses don't get done. And don't forget, we are a big cargo carrier as well. Every one of our airplanes carries at least 9 tons of cargo. And it's, farmers, fisheries, everything is getting hurt because we're not flying enough. So near term, there's a big disruption. I'm very optimistic. But I'll wait till you ask me that question.
So tell me again in connection, what is the kind of supply chain that an airline needs to operate successfully? And what are you doing in Indigo for that?
When we talk of supply chain, one is obviously you're referring more to the material side. We are talking about the people side of the supply chain, if you will. India relies so much on migrant workers. And the reason Indigo has done well is because there's so much movement of people from one part of the country to another. So it's that supply chain that is more interest to us. And equally, the migrant labor going abroad, etc., businessmen traveling. So the supply chain of people is critical for an economy to perform. And that's what is getting disrupted. And Indigo has been on the forefront of making sure that this connectivity all across India. We really want to build one of the best air transportation systems. And I know the government is spending a lot of money on railways and roads. And we say, yeah, great. You don't have to worry about the air connectivity. And we'll build that. This got disrupted very severely. It's slowly coming back. But at this point, I don't want the government to hold us back. They should let us be free and grow as fast as we can.
Okay. Sanjay Srivastava, I want to speak to you about for a lot of companies that want to come into Asia with the current situation with China and with the Belt Road plan and the fact that we are not part of that plan. So I know you've done a couple of very interesting pieces talking about how India can become and come to the forefront of the supply chain institution, the global supply chain. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about that?
Thanks, Vikramjit, for having me. So as part of my discussion, I would possibly want to cover 3 aspects. And that's because from the ecosystem which we run, as we talked of, that the Mahindra World City really runs this integrated business cities on a national basis. And as a result, we are continuously interacting with at least 160 clients of different manufacturing, technology and services who are operating at any given time. And therefore, it gives us a very good view of how they are doing, what were the disruptions. So if you look at it, I think there are three aspects. First is what is really the disruption at the supply chain and what are the implications? And the second thing, so what does it mean for industries, other countries, and how does India fit into the place? And then there's a third part, which is what is really required for India to leverage the opportunity. As all of us say, every challenge is an opportunity. So what is done? So maybe let me just quickly touch on the first two aspects. The reason why this pandemic is unlike any other disruption in supply chain, because the disruption is at multiple levels. There was obviously a disruption of the supply chain with just the goods, but it was a disruption of the goods as well as even people. If you had a raw material, people were not being able to reach if you don't have the infrastructure. Secondly, there was a disruption about the customers. The complete industries across the globe were needed to find new ways to reach the customers. Typically, customers were coming to you. Now we needed to go to the customers. And the third is the market and the product disruption itself. As a result, possibly maybe something as simple as very good an iPad or a laptop, which we were always saying one fine day we will buy. Now we needed it, but it was not available. So at the same time, there were industries like telecom, which were facing extreme competition, and now suddenly they were as important there. So because of this disruption at multiple levels, I think that is the reason why this supply chain is, and the COVID is unprecedented. What does it imply? From what we have learned, speaking with our clients and how they have adapted, I would want to give a very simple hypothesis, but it is a layered, that diversification is now the new differentiation. And when I say diversification is the new differentiation, in a super competitive world, it was about supply chain efficiency and cost efficiency. But now you can really reach or win a market share or a revenue market share if you can reach the client. So therefore, you need to actually diversify into distributed supply chain. You need to think of an innovative way, maybe use technologies like Industry 4.0 and artificial intelligence, where even at a smaller scale, you work efficiently. And while you are doing all of this, please keep a very rapid eye on a new changes or disruptions, because that is where the opportunity would lie. So I just want to use that as a context.
Rono Dutta, one of the things that I was very interested in learning is the fact that Indigo was on an expansion plan. And obviously, this disruption has really thrown the spanner in the works. But there is still a lot of options. But unlike a lot of airlines abroad, there is no rescue package. So most airlines have to deal with the situation in our country, at least deal with whatever financial woes are happening on their own. So what has the disruption done for Indigo going forward?
So I think the disruption, I'll put it in two time frames. One is the next 10 to 12 months near term, and then a longer term time frame of say 18 months and beyond. In the near term, of course, it's very painful in the sense that revenue has declined sharply. So we are flying barely 30% of our capacity, flying 60% load factor. Our revenue has plummeted. So in the near term, it's very, very painful. Fortunately, we have a balance sheet which can weather the storm. So we do see our cash balances declining, but we are also reducing the rate of the cash burn. So on day one, when we were sort of on the ground, totally grounded as an airline, our cash burn was 40 crores a day. We reduced it to 30 crores a day, and we hope to get better all the time. So near term, it's all very grim and bad news, and we are doing our best to reduce our costs. Our approach to the problem right now is let's get better on every front quickly. So we're reducing our cost structure. We're doing our best to improve our liquidity. We're strengthening our brand. We're trying to improve the customer service levels that we have. We're trying to improve our employee engagement, even as we do pay cuts and all that. So we're just trying to get better on every front. Now, looking further out, though, 18 months out, I'm very, very optimistic. And I'll tell you why. We lose a lot of customers at the top end, there's no doubt. Corporate travel will shrink, people will use Zoom or Microsoft Teams and things like that. However, at the bottom end, I see a lot of growth. Don't forget, airlines carry about 140 million passengers a year. The railways, the top two classes alone, carry 1.6 billion. So that there's a lot of room for substitution, and airline travel clearly is the safest mode of travel. And instead of spending 2 nights on a train, would you rather spend 3 hours on an airplane, better safety, and so on. So I see that happening. Equally, though, I see a lot of room for growth around us. Part of the reason both Air India and Jet Airways suffered so much is because the hubs around us, particularly in the Middle East, in Southeast Asia, in Bangkok, in Dubai, they just grew way beyond their normal capacity. And that sucked a lot of traffic out of India. Now these people are in trouble because all this point-to-point connectivity, I think, will wither away to some extent, and people prefer more non-stop service. So all that, I think, will work to the benefit of Indian Airlines. But I do want to segue into an important opportunity because your whole thesis was the one of globalization versus regionalization. And I'm really appalled that India is not pushing the regional story much more vigorously. You know, India's trade in the SAARC countries in South Asia is less than 5% of its trade. It's the least integrated supply chain, if you will, in the world, by a large differentiation. By comparison, East Asia does 50% of its trade in Asia. So it's like we're missing this huge opportunity. And as you know, our traditional supply chain for thousands of years has been India through the region that is now Pakistan, to Afghanistan, Iran, Kazakhstan, etc. And now we've created a big wall there and we're not trading. And it's hurting everyone, and it's hurting Pakistan the most. Now, I know we have issues with terrorism and so forth, but we're letting the terrorists win by stopping this trade. I think India should be vigorously pushing this trade. I think it'll help us a lot, it'll help Pakistan a lot, it'll change the entire geopolitical map of this part of the world. But we're just being very dormant in that. I would love to fly 10 times a day to Karachi, 10 times a day to Lahore, to Kabul, to Chittagong, to Bangladesh and Dhaka. We're not doing that. I mean, these are natural markets for us. So I'm very, very sort of every platform I get, I'm like, guys, we need to push this regional trade in a much more vigorous way.
So you make a very important point and interesting point when you're saying that we need to become the hub first of the region before we think of becoming the global hub. Now, Sanjay Srivastava, you had some very interesting thoughts about how we can become this global hub, especially because in a lot of stuff that we always hear from our country, it's normally always service-based. We don't talk, we seem to be forgetting the manufacturing industry, which is the lifeblood. Agriculture and manufacturing are the two, the crucial, the kinetic energy of the economy. So tell me a little bit about the thoughts about how to increase that part of the supply chain in our country.
Thanks, Bikramjit. So this is something which we just live 24/7, and this will be the real game changer for India if it wants to move from about 2.7 to $5 trillion economy, because one of the biggest chunk is supposed to come is close to manufacturing has to move almost fourfold from 280 to about 1 trillion, and agriculture and related industries are the other key driver. So for implementing that, if we see the different industries, what are they doing in the short term, and therefore what will be the change. So in the short term, every single company, whether Indian or otherwise, is focusing on how quickly you restart the business, you resume some of these supply chains, and then look at business continuity. When they are doing it, that's where the time is just right for India to identify competencies which exist and use that as a nucleus. Just to give you a couple of examples. For example, a significant part of in the larger auto component space, India is already the largest producer of tractors, largest producer of two-wheelers, and of certain bicycles as well. So once you take those competency or capability to plug in into that part of the supply chain and move up the value chain is there. Similarly, an emerging area, I think Rono referred briefly to it, something like even a FMCG and consumer products. The fact that if you are doing a set of agriculture reforms, you are also coming up with new policies that can actually attract a lot of MNCs as well as a very large Indian players to use India as a hub, not just for in India, but for the region. And then you move to the next stage. So if you see what is already happening through a set of initiatives, which is whether it's the new policies which have been announced, whether it is about Atmanirbhar Bharat, whether it is about the special incentive packages, how I see it is the government, the industries and the professionals are really currently firing on or leveraging on three things. The first is very attractive tax incentives, which earlier the Southeast Asian countries were much more competitive. Now we are the lowest. Second, continuous policy thrust. So that's how our EODB ranking has been changing. In fact, now we are among the fastest improving ranking in the last 4 years to now reach 63rd rank. And a very important aspect, if everyone is looking to ramp up their revenue, then India has one of the largest domestic market size. There may be time by which it resumes, but that is those, and when these three things are combined with our capability to invest in something like a good quality skill development and a world-class infrastructure, that will really be their driver to now accelerate and move to manufacturing and agriculture really being the core support pillars for the $5 trillion economy.
Okay. Rono Dutta, I'm going to take a little bit of what Sanjay said, that India has the largest market for a lot of things. And I think Indigo is a great example of how you've been able to harness the Indian airline market and make it grow. And you've also put focus in a lot of parts of the countries which were not there before, because we are very centered around the metros in some ways when it comes to development. How have you used the expertise which you have got in India, and how are you using it when you are expanding and making India the hub for your airline business around the region?
So again, uh, part of the irony is when people start an airline, they say, "Oh, let's go to New York. Let's go to London," and that seems to be such a tempting target. The thing is, you get killed flying to those markets. On the other hand, we have so much rich potential in the neighborhood just around us. To give you an example, how important pilgrim traffic is across the world, Mecca, Medina, Jerusalem, all of that. Well, we have Gaya, and you go to Vietnam and you go to Bangkok and you go to Cambodia, there's such a rich Buddhist population, and they never get a chance to come to Gaya. So we are very much, or were before this COVID hit, very much trying to develop Gaya as this pilgrim traffic. And we started a lot of flights, as you know, to Vietnam and Myanmar and places like that. And I'm anxious to get back into that as well. But equally, I'll tell you, our natural markets are to the west, to a large extent historically, Iran, Kazakhstan, Afghanistan. We just need to get this Pakistan versus India issue behind us. We should behave like there was no partition. It never happened. Yes, politically it's there, but economically and everything else from a mindset, it's the subcontinent. So Bangladesh has moved a lot in that direction in terms of let's open up trade, let's forget the past. But India needs to take that lead with Pakistan and not let the terrorists get in the way. There's such a rich treasure trove of business and trade that's available to the West.
Well, Rono Dutta, what you're saying is the subject for an entirely different debate and probably a 10-day conference. So we can't really go into that. But let me ask both of you this very important question, because it's something that struck me, especially when the lockdown first happened, which was the realization that there's such a vast population in our country which does not get the support, because all the development happens in pockets. So first I'll start with you, Sanjay Srivastava. How are you guys doing? What are you doing about moving away from these established pockets? Now, in these pockets, like, something like Noida contributes to most of the development which happens in this part of Uttar Pradesh. I mean, if Noida is taken out, Noida and Faridabad taken out, Noida is taken out of UP, development levels will go down. There's no doubt about that. So what are your views about this, Sanjay?
I'm glad, Bikramjit, that now this realization that how we have to together get Bharat and India to work together to both contribute and benefit is now coming mainstream. So in fact, our whole philosophy has been that we have created these economic nerve centers at Mahindra World City and Origins, which are on well-established growth corridor, but are exactly away from the super congested hubs. And companies who came in, our clients have seen the benefit, because when the phased unlocking started, because of the being well planned and away from the city center, there was zero containment area, and therefore the resumption can happen, which even right now, me sitting in Mumbai or Rono sitting in Delhi, you are still seeing there is a significant amount of good work done, but a significant amount of done. So the fact that if you can have these well-planned integrated ecosystem on the high growth corridor, not in the middle of nowhere, but away from the center, then that really can create a good amount of economic growth. That also ties up with the focus, which everything this pandemic brought in right in the center, is to a balance between generating livelihood or economic growth and also saving life. So that's one thing. The second thing, with the advent of technology, I think the classic divide, whether it is in information or capabilities between a tier 1 city or a tier 2, is now, there's no barrier. And I'll just give you two examples of how we have seen. One, in this lockdown, there have been MSMEs who identified their traditional clients where they had a very low market share, because they could actually quickly restart. They actually not just maintained the market share, but they increased it. And the other thing, if you look at how innovation is happening, and that's where I think our youth contributes. I'm sure everyone has heard of that, from producing a certain level of PP industry, in 60 days it scaled up to a world's second largest producer and being a 10,000 crore worth of industry. So that goes on to show that technology, information, when combined with a good quality infrastructure, can actually then really accelerate the growth and a planned growth. So if I look from a customer or the client perspective, what is in it for them? I think they are looking for three things, which is what this can enable. One is, while the nation or the state governments can give a EODB, they are looking for EODB in operations. So if you do a well planned away from the congestion, you can have a better thing. Second thing, faster time to market. So if you can create this kind of a plug and play infrastructure, not just Indian companies, but others will also come in. And then the third, business continuity and resilience. So if any country or any ecosystem can deliver these three and do it on a consistent basis, that will really be the lever for growth.
I think the term, best laid plans is very apt for a lot of work that happens in India, because nobody likes to stick to plans. And a lot of the stuff that's happened after this pandemic is very reactive. And as a nation, we love to be very reactive. So we don't really do things with a foresight in many ways for some reason. That's what I always feel. Now, I would like both of you, starting with you, Rono Dutta, to now think about COVID as a clean slate. You have now the opportunity to do things the way you want to do. So, what are the things that you would like to do with Indigo to make it a global player?
Yeah. Uh, but I don't want to lose the thread that you want to be global but act local.
Ah.
We have so much opportunities within the country, first of all, just domestically. And I just want to talk about those tier 2 cities that Sanjay mentioned. So we've been focusing on city by city. So I'll take Raipur as a great example. I mean, Raipur as a city, it showed promise, but there were hardly 2-3 flights a day. We started flying like 25 times a day from Hyderabad, Bangalore, Delhi, Calcutta, every place. And as we did that, Bhopal said, hey, what about us? I mean, you're not flying to Bhopal at all. So then we shifted our focus to Bhopal. Then we said, what about Jodhpur? So we're going through these nerve centers, if you will, and giving them connectivity. And I think that's where we see, frankly, the biggest opportunity for growth. Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore is great, but are they going to grow at the same rate? No, it's the Indore, it's the Raipur, it's those sort of cities that are very, very promising to us. Now, once we've done that, our next wave is really to the cities around us. And it's like Singapore, Thailand, Dubai, Doha, and that's the range we're focusing on. And we've got so much potential in these that we're not in a rush to, let's just go to New York and Tokyo. We'll get to that eventually.
Sanjay, Srivastava, tell us a little bit about what your plans would be if COVID is considered to be a total clean slate.
Absolutely agree with you. And in fact, the kind of processes which we are implementing for the last 2 decades, the value of that has come to the fore as a result of that. So like for 2 decades, our mission, it has been embedded that we will talk about livelihood, living and life. And now if you see, that is what everyone is talking of. So what we are very clearly doing, strategy is good. Let's come to the execution. So we have created a 6x6 matrix where we are focusing on the top 6 countries where there is a geopolitical alignment, there is a attractive strategic market, and existing case studies exist. Combining it with the top priority 6 sectors where there is a fitment. And I'll just give you a quick couple of examples. So as I talked of the auto and auto component, and therefore you can get embedded into even the larger manufacturing component. Similarly, India moved from nil to world's 2nd largest mobile manufacturer. Now you have to use that capability and now focus on electronics and ESDM. You have suddenly seen 3 parallel policies being announced, which is unprecedented. India is already a largest market for pharma at a generic level and vaccine, but you have to move up the value chain to get it.
Yeah, very important.
So that's if we focus on this 6x6 matrix and really go after that, and we have seen some early results that the industries as well as countries are seeing the value proposition in what we are proposing. And even in midst of lockdown, there are active dialogues happening and as well as some sign-ups. So we will say earlier, digital was good to have. Now I'll say that digital is business. So if digital is business, we have to just move faster and capture the market.
Absolutely. I think the important learnings that I'm getting from this panel is the fact that we have to be realistic. We can't have ego. It has to be about business for us to be able to grow and be part of the global supply chain and be an important player. I want to thank both my panelists. Thank you very much for giving me time and giving us such interesting points of views for a subject which I don't think can be discussed in just half an hour. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights. And ladies and gentlemen, we ask that you keep visiting our resource center for downloading various informative and incredibly valuable assets, and also visit our help center in the lobby for any queries that you may have. Do keep an eye on the leaderboard, of course, to discover and monitor your overall score.